We are taught a specific story about the dawn of human civilization. We believe that for hundreds of thousands of years, we were simple nomads, hunter-gatherers, living hand-to-mouth in caves, and that it was only around 10,000 years ago, when we invented agriculture, that we finally settled down and began building complex societies. It is a neat, tidy, and logical timeline, but it is wrong. Buried deep in the soil of modern-day Turkey are discoveries that absolutely shatter this conventional history. We are looking at massive stone temples built 12,000 years ago by people who supposedly didn't yet know how to farm. We are looking at subterranean cities carved 18 stories deep into solid rock, designed to hide 20,000 people from an unknown threat. These aren't just ruins. These are impossibilities. They force us to ask one fundamental question: do we truly understand our own origins? Today we are counting down 10 ancient sites in Turkey that are rewriting the story of human history. If there is one place on this planet that proves history is not a straight line, it is Göbekli Tepe. Located in the Cermuş Mountains of southeastern Turkey, this site has become the ultimate nightmare for conventional historians. Why? Because it shouldn't exist. To understand why, we need to talk about dates. For decades, the story of human development was simple. We were hunters, we discovered agriculture, we settled into villages, and then, and only then, did we have the spare time and resources to build monuments. But Göbekli Tepe throws that entire model out the window. It was built roughly 12,000 years ago. That is over 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids of Giza and 6,000 years before Stonehenge. At this time, human beings were supposed to be wandering nomadic groups with nothing more than stone tools struggling for their next meal. Yet, here we find massive, T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in perfect circular enclosures. These aren't just rocks. They are decorated with stunningly detailed relief carvings of lions, foxes, vultures, and scorpions, animals that hold deep symbolic, perhaps even religious meaning. The logistics alone are mind-boggling. How did a society of hunter-gatherers, without metal tools, without beasts of burden, and without the wheel, quarry, transport, and perfectly align these massive monoliths? It implies a level of social organization, leadership, and shared purpose that we didn't think existed for another several millennia. But perhaps the most profound mystery is this: Göbekli Tepe wasn't a city. We haven't found houses, we haven't found domestic waste, and we haven't found evidence of long-term habitation. It appears to have been built strictly for ritual. It was a pilgrimage site, a temple constructed to bring thousands of people together from across the landscape. Then, about 9,000 years ago, something even stranger happened. The people who built it deliberately buried the entire site under tons of earth and stone, sealing it away as if to preserve it for the future. For thousands of years, this zero point in time remained hidden beneath a man-made hill. When it was rediscovered, it forced us to rethink everything. Did the need for spiritual connection actually trigger the development of agriculture? Did these ancient people stop moving because they needed to gather here for rituals, thus forcing them to master farming just to feed the pilgrims? Göbekli Tepe reminds us that we are an ancient, deeply intelligent species. It suggests that our capacity for art, architecture, and complex belief systems wasn't something that evolved later. It was there from the very beginning. We just haven't been looking back far enough. If Göbekli Tepe is the zero point of human civilization, then its mysterious sister site, Karahan Tepe, is the place where that story gets even stranger. Located just about 35 kilometers away from Göbekli Tepe, this site was only brought to light very recently. And what archaeologists are finding here is, quite frankly, unsettling. When you walk through the site of Karahan Tepe, you aren't just looking at pillars. You are looking at a masterclass in ancient obsession. The site features a massive, carved-out bedrock basin, a circular chamber surrounded by towering T-shaped monoliths that seem to emerge directly from the living rock of the mountain itself. But it's the carvings that truly stop you in your tracks. While Göbekli Tepe is famous for its animal reliefs, Karahan Tepe takes it a step further. We're talking about highly stylized, almost surreal depictions of human figures and abstract shapes that we simply cannot explain. There is one particular chamber that has captured the world's attention. It features a large, carved stone head of a man, and around it, several phallic-shaped pillars. What makes this so significant is the sheer sophistication of the craft. Remember, we are still talking about the pre-pottery Neolithic period, 12,000 years ago. In our traditional textbooks, this is a time when art was supposed to be limited to crude cave paintings or tiny figurines. But here, in the middle of the Turkish highlands, we find monumental sculpture that requires planning, geometric precision, and a level of artistic intent that rivals the classical civilizations of much later eras. The big question that researchers are grappling with is, what was the relationship between this place and Göbekli Tepe? Were they part of a massive, interconnected network of ritual centers? Did the same groups of people rotate between these sites for seasonal festivals? The precision of the architecture suggests that Karahan Tepe wasn't just a random spot chosen for a camp. It was a carefully engineered sacred space, perfectly aligned to track the heavens, or perhaps to serve as a gateway to the spirit world. And there's a haunting quality to it all. Just like its sister site, Karahan Tepe was intentionally backfilled. After hundreds of years of use, the people who built these masterpieces chose to bury them, to hide them beneath the earth, protecting them from the elements and the passage of time. They left them behind in a state of sleeping beauty, waiting for us to uncover them 12 millennia later. When you stand there, looking at these stones, you have to realize that you are looking at the foundation of the human mind. We didn't just stumble into complexity. We arrived at it through a deep, profound, and organized quest for meaning. Karahan Tepe forces us to face a difficult truth. Our ancestors were not primitive people. They were architects of the soul, building monuments to ideas that we are only just beginning to decipher today. If you think the apartment complex is a modern invention, let me introduce you to Çatalhöyük. Located in the heart of the Konya Plain, this site doesn't look like any city you've ever seen. In fact, it barely looks like a city at all. For nearly 2,000 years, starting around 7500 BC, this was one of the largest and most densely populated settlements on Earth. But it functioned in a way that completely defies our urban logic. Imagine a city with no streets, no alleys, no roads, no public squares. Just a solid honeycomb mass of houses packed so tightly together that they shared walls. To move through this city, you didn't walk on the ground, you walked on the roofs. You'd climb a ladder from your home, emerge onto your flat roof, and travel across the tops of your neighbors' houses to get to where you needed to go. It was, quite literally, a three-dimensional community. But the real mystery of Çatalhöyük isn't just the architecture, it's the way they lived within it. We've excavated hundreds of these homes, and they are incredibly uniform. There are no grand palaces, no distinct temples, and no massive mansions. There's almost no sign of social inequality. It seems that everyone, from the hunters to the farmers, lived in homes of roughly the same size and quality. For a civilization of this scale, that is virtually unheard of. And then, there is the internal life of these homes. In Çatalhöyük, your house was your sanctuary, but also your graveyard. Archaeologists have found hundreds of burials beneath the floors of these dwellings. They were literally living with their ancestors, day after day, beneath the very platforms where they cooked, slept, and raised their children. The boundaries between the living and the dead were not just blurred, they were non-existent. The walls were decorated with vibrant, complex murals, bulls with massive horns, hunting scenes, and geometric patterns that look almost like modern art. These aren't just decorations. They are evidence of a culture that was deeply, obsessively symbolic. They were decorating their living spaces to communicate with the spiritual world. When we look at Çatalhöyük, we see a failed experiment, or perhaps a masterpiece of human cooperation. We see a society that chose to live in total equality, where the community was prioritized above the individual, and where the past was always present in the home. They eventually abandoned this site, walking away from their honeycomb city after 2 millennia. We don't fully know why. Was it environmental change, social shifts, disease? We may never have the definitive answer, but what remains is the echo of a people who showed us that humans are capable of living in ways that are far more communal and far more intimate than anything we experience in our modern, disconnected high-rise apartments today. Çatalhöyük isn't just a ruin, it's a mirror, showing us a version of ourselves that we have long since forgotten. If you want to understand what true, unyielding power looked like 3,500 years ago, you have to stand before the gates of Hattusa. Hidden in the rugged highlands of north-central Turkey, this was the heart of the Hittite Empire, a civilization that dared to challenge the might of Egypt and walked toe-to-toe with the greatest powers of the Bronze Age. But when you arrive here, you're not just seeing the ruins of a city, you are staring at a massive, complex, and deeply intimidating feat of engineering. The first thing that hits you is the scale. We are talking about 6 kilometers of defensive walls that once encircled the city, guarded by towers so massive they seemed designed to withstand an army of giants. The most famous of these is the Lion Gate. Imagine standing there thousands of years ago as an emissary or a soldier, looking up at 2 colossal limestone lions, carved with such raw, primal intensity that they feel like they're still watching over the city. These aren't just decorative, they were psychological warfare. They were a message written in stone. This city is protected by forces beyond your comprehension. And then, there is the secret tunnel, the Yerkape. It's a 60-meter-long tunnel that cuts directly beneath the city's ramparts. Even today, walking through that dark, stone-vaulted passage is an eerie experience. You have to wonder, what kind of technology, what kind of workforce, and what kind of planning did it take to move these multi-ton blocks of limestone and fit them together with such tight precision that you can barely slide a blade between them? We are talking about the Bronze Age, yet the engineering here feels almost mechanical in its accuracy. The Hittites were not just conquerors, they were the masters of metal. They were one of the first civilizations to truly unlock the secrets of iron, a technology that gave them an immense advantage on the battlefield. Walking through Hattusa, you realize that this wasn't just a capital city, it was the world's first high-tech fortress. What makes Hattusa truly fascinating, though, is its collapse. Around 1200 BC, at the height of the mysterious Bronze Age collapse that wiped out civilizations across the Mediterranean, Hattusa was abandoned. It was burned, yes, but it was also systematically emptied. It's as if a great, powerful organism simply decided to pack up and leave. So what happened to the people who moved mountains to build these walls? Did they disappear, or did they just blend into the landscape, taking their ironworking secrets with them? When you stand on the great temple platform and look out over the valley, you feel the weight of their absence. It's a silent, stony reminder that no matter how high your walls are and no matter how advanced your weapons become, time eventually claims everything. Hattusa teaches us that history is a cycle of rising and falling. The Hittites were the masters of the world, and today, they are a mystery that we are still trying to reconstruct, one stone at a time. If you travel just a short distance from the mighty Hittite capital of Hattusa, you will stumble upon a place that seems to hold a different kind of secret. This is Alacahöyük. To the untrained eye, it might look like just another mound of earth and stone, but don't let the quiet landscape fool you. Beneath these layers lies one of the most puzzling chapters in early Bronze Age history. The first thing you'll notice when you arrive is the Sphinx Gate. These aren't just decorative figures. They are massive, carved guardians with a distinct, almost Mesopotamian influence, standing watch over an entrance that led into a world we are still struggling to fully understand. But the true mystery of Alacahöyük doesn't lie in its walls. It lies in what we found, buried within its royal tombs. Back in the 1930s, archaeologists unearthed 13 royal graves here. What they found inside literally shocked the historical community. We are talking about gold, silver, and copper artifacts that show a level of metalworking sophistication that, frankly, shouldn't have existed at that time. The most famous of these are the sun discs. These are circular objects made of bronze, intricately crafted with animal figures like deer and birds, often decorated with silver or gold. Some of them are so complex with delicate open-work patterns that looking at them makes you question the technology of the day. How did a culture living nearly 5,000 years ago manage to cast metal with such precision? How did they achieve that level of artistic detail without the advanced tools we assume were required? These weren't just jewelry. These discs were symbols of cosmic power, likely representing the sun, the seasons, or the order of the universe. They suggest that the people of Alacahöyük were not just living. They were observing, they were mapping the heavens, and they were expressing their understanding of the divine through the medium of molten metal. What makes Alacahöyük so haunting is that it predates the Hittite Empire by centuries. It feels like a lost culture, a precursor that held knowledge and craftsmanship that somehow flourished and then faded into the silence of time. When you walk among these ruins, you realize that the story of human progress isn't a simple ladder where we started with nothing and slowly got better. It was a series of peaks, moments in time where humanity reached a level of brilliance that seems to disappear as quickly as it arrived. So, who were these people? Were they the ancestors of the Hittites, or were they a separate, highly advanced society that held the keys to early metallurgy in the ancient world? Every time we look at those sun disks, the question repeats, what else have we forgotten? Alacahöyük isn't just a site of buried gold. It's a site of buried knowledge, standing as a testament to an ancient brilliance that we are still trying to match today. For thousands of years, the world believed that Troy was nothing more than a bedtime story, a beautiful tragic myth spun by Homer in his Iliad. We thought it was a fable about gods, heroes, and a giant wooden horse. But then, in the 1870s, a man named Heinrich Schliemann did the unthinkable. He started digging. And what he found proved that the most famous war in history wasn't just a poem. It was real. When you arrive at the site of Troy, in northwestern Turkey, you aren't looking at just one city. You are looking at a giant, layered cake of human history. There are 9 distinct layers of Troy stacked on top of one another, spanning nearly 4,000 years. Each layer tells a story of rising power, horrific destruction, and constant rebuilding. Walking here, you see the massive stone walls, the very walls that Homer described as impregnable. You can stand by the ramparts and look out over the Troad plain, watching the same wind blow across the fields where Achilles and Hector once faced each other. It's a surreal experience. You are literally walking on the dust of legends. But here is where the story gets complicated. Which one of these 9 cities was the Troy of the Trojan War? Historians have argued about this for decades. Some point to Troy 6, with its majestic walls and towers, which were eventually destroyed by a massive earthquake. Others look at Troy 7a, a city that shows clear signs of fire and warfare, fitting the timeline of a collapse. The truth is, Troy wasn't just one war. It was a strategic hub, the gatekeeper between the Aegean and the Black Sea. Any power that controlled this hill controlled the wealth of the ancient world. Think about the sheer human cost of this place. Thousands of lives were lost defending these walls, not just because of a story about a queen, but because of trade, power, and the thirst for dominance. This was the commercial crossroads of the Bronze Age. As you look at these ruins, you realize that the myth of the Trojan horse is more than just a trick. It is a symbol of how history is written by the survivors. The Greeks didn't just conquer the city, they turned it into an immortal legend. By romanticizing the destruction, they ensured that Troy would never truly die. Today, Troy stands as a humbling reminder of how history and myth become tangled together. We go there looking for the wooden horse and the golden armor of Achilles, but what we find is something much more profound. The ruins of a real, breathing city that was destroyed, abandoned, and forgotten, only to be resurrected by the power of our own storytelling. Troy wasn't just a place. It was the beginning of our fascination with the epic. A reminder that while cities fall and empires crumble, the stories we tell about them are the only things that truly last. Imagine you are living in an era of constant invasion. You have no walls to protect you, no armor to hide behind. So what do? You don't hide behind the earth, you vanish into it. Welcome to Derinkuyu, the most impossible city on earth. Hidden deep beneath the volcanic rock of Cappadocia, Turkey, lies a labyrinth that defies everything we know about ancient engineering. We aren't talking about a simple cave or a bunker. We are talking about an 18-story underground metropolis, reaching 85 meters down into the earth. It was designed to house up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock, their food supplies, and their entire way of life. When you first step into the narrow tunnels of Derinkuyu, the first thing that hits you is the sheer, suffocating silence. But as you descend deeper, the silence gives way to awe. You see kitchens with blackened ceilings from ancient fires, stables for animals, churches, schoolrooms, and even wine presses. They had everything. But the engineering is the true mystery. How did they achieve such perfect, complex ventilation? They built vertical shafts, thousands of them, that acted as air ducts, ensuring fresh oxygen could reach the deepest levels of the city. And the security? It was genius. They used massive, circular stone wheels, weighing half a ton each, that could be rolled from the inside to seal off corridors entirely. If an army breached the surface, the city simply locked itself down, turning into a fortress that was practically impossible to conquer. But the question that haunts every researcher is, why? Who were these people, and what were they so terrified of, that they would choose to live their entire lives, generation after generation, beneath the ground? Some say it was to escape the Roman persecutions or the Persian raids. But there is a whisper among those who study the site that suggests something even older, something that predates the historical records we rely on. Walking through these dark, cramped corridors, you feel a profound sense of claustrophobia, followed quickly by a feeling of profound respect. The air is cool, heavy with the weight of thousands of years. You realize that this wasn't just a place to survive. It was a testament to the sheer, stubborn human will to persist against all odds. They lived in the dark, yet they created a society that functioned like a clock. When you finally emerge back into the bright, blinding sunlight of the Cappadocia Valley, you're left with a lingering question. If our ancestors could build a city under the mountains just to stay safe, what other secrets are still buried beneath our feet, waiting for us to find them? Derinkuyu isn't just a tourist site, it's a profound reminder that history isn't always written in stone on the surface. Sometimes it's written in the dark, deep down where the world cannot reach it. There are places in this world that make you feel small, and then there is Mount Nemrut. Standing at over 2,000 meters above sea level in the remote highlands of southeastern Turkey, you'll find a site that defies logic. This is the mountaintop monument of King Antiochus I, a man who, 2,000 years ago, decided that being a king wasn't enough. He wanted to be a god. When you first stand on this summit, the first thing that hits you is the sheer absurdity of the construction. How did they get these massive, multi-ton statues up here? There were no roads, no heavy machinery, and no easy way to navigate these treacherous slopes. Yet, here they sit, colossal stone heads of Zeus, Hercules, Apollo, and Antiochus himself, all staring out into the horizon with a calm, eternal gaze. For centuries, these statues watched over the landscape, their eyes fixed on the sunrise and sunset. But nature, as it always does, eventually fought back. A massive earthquake likely toppled the heads from their bodies, leaving them scattered on the terraces below. And yet, even in their broken state, they are breathtaking. They don't look like ruins. They look like fallen giants, waiting for a command that will never come. What makes Nemrut truly fascinating isn't just the size of the statues, it's the arrogance and the beauty of the vision. Antiochus believed he was the bridge between the East and the West, between the Persian gods and the Greek gods. He built this massive artificial hill, this tumulus, as his final resting place, a sanctuary where he could be worshipped alongside the deities he claimed as his ancestors. He even left a long, grand inscription for any future traveler to read, promising eternal glory to those who respected his monument and curses to those who didn't. But standing there today, in the biting wind, you realize the irony. The kingdom of Commagene is gone. Antiochus's name is a footnote in history books. The eternal glory he sought has been weathered away by snow, rain, and the shifting earth. The gods he worshipped remain, but they are hollow, broken stone. However, there is something deeply moving about this place. When you watch the sun begin to rise over the horizon, lighting up the faces of these fallen giants, you feel a connection to something much older than the king. You feel the scale of the landscape and the insignificance of our own fleeting lives. Mount Nemrut is a paradox. It is a monument to an ego that tried to conquer time, yet it is now a testament to time's victory over everything. It asks us a difficult question. When we leave this world, what do we hope to leave behind? Do we want our names etched in stone, or do we want our legacy to be something more enduring? As you walk back down from the summit, leaving the statues to their quiet vigil, you're reminded that the mountains don't care about our power. They don't care about our titles. They only care about the cycle of the sun and the slow, grinding turn of history. Mount Nemrut is not just a place to see statues. It is a place to confront the truth of our own mortality, surrounded by the ghosts of kings who thought they could live forever. If you ever find yourself wondering whether ancient stone can truly hold a human soul, you need to go to Aphrodisias. Tucked away in the fertile valleys of western Turkey, this city wasn't just a place where people lived. It was the place where beauty was worshipped. Named after Aphrodite, the goddess of love, this city became the absolute capital of sculpture in the ancient world. When you walk through the ruins here, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer quality of the marble. Because the city sat right next to a rich marble quarry, its people didn't just build homes, they built masterpieces. They became the Michelangelos of the Roman Empire. The sculptors here were so famous that their work was exported to Rome, Constantinople, and beyond. If you wanted the finest statue in the Mediterranean, you commissioned an artist from Aphrodisias. As you wander through the Sebastean, the great temple dedicated to the Roman emperors, you realize this wasn't just a site for statues. It was a gallery. The reliefs here are so detailed that you can see the folds of a goddess's robe, the tension in a wrestler's muscle, and the very specific expressions on human faces that have been frozen for 2,000 years. It's breathtaking. You're looking at figures that seem like they could just step off their pedestals and start walking beside you. But there is a melancholy here too. Aphrodisias was a city of theater, sports, and philosophy. It had one of the best preserved stadiums in the entire ancient world, capable of holding 30,000 people. Can you imagine the roar of that crowd? The intensity of the games? Today, that stadium is silent, filled with nothing but grass and the ghosts of cheers that faded away centuries ago. The city's decline was slow. As the Roman Empire shifted, and as Christianity replaced the old pagan cults, the focus of Aphrodisias changed. Statues were toppled, temples were repurposed, and eventually, the name of Aphrodite herself was scrubbed from the city's identity. But the earth was kind. A massive earthquake buried much of the city in silt, effectively freezing it in time, keeping the statues safe from the looting and destruction that hit other ancient sites. When you stand in the museum today, looking into the eyes of these marble faces, you realize the irony. The people who lived here, the merchants, the athletes, the sculptors themselves, are long forgotten. Their names are dust. But the art they left behind, that has achieved the immortality they were searching for. Aphrodisias reminds us that while empires are built on politics and war, they are remembered for their art. It teaches us that beauty is not just a luxury, it is the most durable language we have. Thousands of years later, we don't know the names of the people who carved these stones, but we know their hearts. We know their devotion, their humor, and their passion for the human form. And really, isn't that the truest form of legacy? They call Ani the city of 1001 churches, but when you stand here, in the vast, empty silence of the Armenian highland, it feels more like the city of 1001 ghosts. Located right on the border between Turkey and Armenia, this place is arguably one of the most hauntingly beautiful ruins in the entire world. 1,000 years ago, Ani was a metropolis to rival Constantinople. It was a thriving, bustling hub of Silk Road trade, a center of art, philosophy, and architectural genius. It was home to 100,000 people, a massive, sprawling capital that felt like it would last forever. But today, if you visit, you will find almost no one. The city is gone, its walls are crumbling, and its once vibrant cathedrals are left to face the biting wind alone. What happened? It wasn't just one thing. It was a slow, painful erosion of fate. Ani was hit by earthquakes, sacked by Mongol invaders, ravaged by famine, and eventually, the trade routes that fed its prosperity simply shifted elsewhere. The world moved on, and Ani was left behind in the dust of history. When you walk through the ruins, you're greeted by the Cathedral of Ani. Even half collapsed, with its massive dome fallen into the nave, it remains a masterpiece. The pointed arches and the complex brickwork, features that wouldn't appear in Western architecture for centuries, show that the people who built this were centuries ahead of their time. But there's a heavy sadness here. As you wander through the ruins of churches, you see frescoes that are slowly fading, colors that are peeling away like skin, and stones that have been scarred by cannon fire and time. You see the deep, jagged gorge of the Akurian River, which acts as a natural border, separating the ruins of Ani from the modern world across the water. It feels as if this city is trapped in a permanent state of longing. Why does Ani matter? It matters because it's a perfect, brutal reminder of how fragile human ambition truly is. We build cities that we think will last for eternity. We build monuments to our faith, our wealth, and our pride. And yet, nature and history are indifferent to our efforts. Standing in the center of the cathedral, listening to the wind howl through the empty window frames, you aren't just looking at history, you're listening to it. You're hearing the echo of a people who were once the masters of this land, whose songs, whose prayers, and whose lives have all evaporated into the grass and the stones. Ani isn't just a site of crumbling walls. It's a place of quiet, dignified mourning. It forces you to ask, what happens to our creations when we are gone? Does the stone remember? Does the wind care? In Ani, the answer seems to be that everything eventually returns to the earth. It is a lonely, beautiful, and profoundly honest place. It's a city that has stopped waiting for the world to come back and has instead settled into a deep, eternal sleep. So what do these 10 sites really tell us? They tell us that history is not a static book written in stone. It is a living, breathing, and deeply mysterious story that we are still just beginning to read. We used to think our ancestors were primitive, struggling to survive in a harsh world. But the stones of Turkey prove otherwise. They show us that humans have always been driven by a profound need to create, to connect, and to reach for something greater than themselves. Whether it's the temples of Göbekli Tepe or the hidden rooms of Derinkuyu, these sites are not just ruins. They are mirrors. They reflect our own potential, our resilience, and our eternal curiosity. History isn't just about what happened in the past. It's about understanding who we are today. Because when we finally accept that our origin story is more complex and more ancient than we ever imagined, we stop looking at the past as a finish line and start seeing it as the ultimate inspiration for our future.